She has been missing for 37 days. But her account is still active. No one has logged into her account. The police already confirmed that. But just now, a new post appeared. Timestamped 3 minutes ago. They said it was just a routine traffic accident. The police released a short statement at 10 in the morning. A single vehicle left the road in the early hours. No signs of criminal activity. It sounded reasonable. Bad weather. Wet pavement. Perhaps a tired driver. Everything made sense. But what disturbed me was not the car. It was the absence of a person. At 6:17 that morning, the sky was grey and heavy. The coastline looked like a cold scar along the edge of the city. As I drove past the highway, I saw a black sedan resting beside the guardrail. The front was slightly turned, but there were no visible signs of impact. No shattered headlights. No broken parts. Not even a skid mark. It did not look out of control. It looked placed there. The driver's seat was empty. A phone lay on the passenger seat. The screen was dark. The key was still in the ignition. The engine was cold. That meant the car had been sitting there for at least an hour. If it was an accident, why would the driver leave? And why was there no call for help? I walked around to the back of the vehicle. On the ground, I noticed several dark stains. Not many, but enough to stand out. It was not oil. It was not mud. The color was too deep, like blood that had been partially wiped away. The wind came in from the ocean. The air smelled of salt and something heavier. I looked toward the end of the road. There was no one there. And yet, I had the strange feeling that someone had just been standing there, watching, before quietly walking away. Later, the official explanation was simple. The driver may have been emotionally unstable. He left the scene temporarily. The case was classified as an accidental disappearance. But one detail in the report was barely mentioned. The blood found at the scene did not belong to the owner of the car, which meant there had been a second person. Someone the police never publicly discussed. From that moment on, I knew this was not an accident. It was a carefully designed exit. The killer did not create chaos. He created something far more effective. He created reason. Reason convincing enough to stop questions. And the real question remains: if this was not an accident, where is the driver now? And more importantly, is that second person still somewhere out there, watching us? The police received the first report at 7:40 in the morning. The caller was a road maintenance worker. He passed that highway every day. According to him, the car was not there at 6:30, which means the vehicle was placed there between 6:30 and 7:40. Less than 70 minutes. That missing hour became the most important gap in the entire case. I reviewed the traffic footage. There was only one old camera covering that stretch of road. The image quality was poor. The timestamp flickered occasionally. At 6:29, the road was empty. At 6:32, the screen glitched for a brief second. When the image returned, the black sedan was already there. There was no footage of it arriving. No footage of it stopping. It simply appeared. The official explanation was simple. Camera delay. Technical malfunction. Old equipment. All reasonable. But another question remained. If this was an accident, the driver should have been inside the car, or at least nearby. But investigators found no clear footprints. There had been light rain earlier that morning. The ground was damp. The soil was soft. Yet there were no complete sets of tracks leading away from the vehicle. It was as if no one had stepped out, or as if someone had driven the car there and left without touching the ground. There was something else. The dash camera was missing, removed intentionally. The memory card was gone. The owner's phone showed one final outgoing call at 5:57 a.m. The call lasted 37 seconds. The number was unregistered. After that call, all activity stopped, as if someone had pressed mute on a human life. The blood analysis results returned sooner than expected. The samples were sent to the state laboratory. 2 days later, the report came back. The blood belonged to a woman, estimated age between 25 and 35. There was no match in the DNA database, which meant she had no criminal record. She may have never even left an official medical trace. The police chose not to release this information. Their reason was simple. The evidence has not been confirmed as directly related to the case. But if she was not related to the case, why was her blood at the scene? I began looking into the owner of the car. His name was Daniel Harper, 34 years old, single, software engineer, no debt, no history of violence. Neighbors described him with one word: quiet. His life was almost painfully ordinary. Work, gym, home, occasional morning runs along the coast. No obvious conflicts. No unusual behavior before he disappeared. Except for one thing. The phone call at 5:57 a.m. I tried tracing the unregistered number. The telecom company provided very little information. It was a prepaid SIM card. The registration details were false. It had been purchased at a 24-hour convenience store, only 3 kilometers from the highway. Security footage was stored for just 7 days. By the time authorities requested it, the recording had already been overwritten. Just when it seemed like a dead end, another detail surfaced: Daniel's computer browsing history. During the week before he vanished, he repeatedly searched one name, a woman's name, Lena Moore. I searched for that name online. There were not many results. One social media account that had been inactive for 2 years. The last post was a photo of the coastline. The timestamp reads 6:32 a.m. Exactly the same time the car appeared on camera. The location tag placed the photo near that very stretch of highway. Below the image was a single sentence: "Finally, it's over." No emojis. No explanation. After that post, the account went silent. I began to wonder, was she the owner of the blood? If so, why was she there? What was her connection to Daniel? And more disturbingly, if she wrote "Finally, it's over," what exactly had ended? After finding Lena's old social media account, I began reviewing her past posts. Most of them were ordinary. Coffee, books, walks along the coast, occasional selfies. Nothing alarming. Until I noticed a deleted photo. The image itself was no longer accessible, but several comments were still visible. One of them was from Daniel. The timestamp was 2 years ago. He wrote, "Are you sure this is the only way?" No emoji. No explanation. Lena replied with a single sentence: "We've already discussed it." That was their last public interaction. After that, there was no visible connection between them online. Yet Daniel's browsing history showed something different. In the week before he disappeared, he searched her name 17 times. Late at night, early in the morning, as if trying to convince himself of something, or preparing to face someone. I began to wonder, was the 5:57 a.m. phone call made to Lena? If so, what was said in those 37 seconds? An argument? A goodbye? Or confirmation of a plan? What troubled me even more was the timing. After posting finally, it's over, Lena's account went silent. No logins. No new locations. As if her life had been paused. 2 people. Same morning. Same stretch of time. Both disappearing. It started to feel less like coincidence, and more like an arrangement. But if it was an arrangement, why the blood? Why the missing dash camera? Why the interference in the surveillance footage? This did not look like a runaway couple. It did not look like a simple breakup. It looked like someone needed this disappearance to appear reasonable. And the question grew heavier. If Lena was not the victim, was she a participant? Or worse, was she the architect of everything? Just as my attention was shifting toward Lena, an internal police supplement revealed a detail that had been overlooked. Daniel's bank account. 2 days before he disappeared, there was an unusual transfer. The amount was not large. $5,000. The recipient was a private psychological consulting firm. Public records showed no history of therapy. At least none officially documented. But in the transfer note, there were only 2 words. Phase 2. Phase 2. That did not sound like a routine appointment. It sounded like progress. I began to reassess Daniel. His life appeared stable, but his browsing history revealed more than I initially noticed. Is identity reset legal? How to erase digital traces? Coastal areas without surveillance. These searches appeared repeatedly during the month before he vanished. If Daniel was the victim, why was he researching this? If Lena was the manipulator, why did all preparations originate from Daniel? A possibility emerged. Perhaps the disappearance was Daniel's plan from the beginning, and Lena was only a piece of it. Or perhaps a piece being used. That 37-second phone call might not have been an argument. It might have been confirmation. Confirmation of an exit already in motion. But if this was self-directed, how do we explain the blood? Unless it was never meant to hide a murder. It was meant to create the appearance of one. Someone needed the authorities to believe Daniel had met with foul play, so no one would search for a man who chose to disappear. The question shifted. Maybe we should not be asking, who harmed Daniel? Maybe we should be asking, what was Daniel trying to escape? The psychological consulting firm was not located downtown. It sat near the edge of the city, close to an old industrial district. Its registration records were unusually clean. Founded 3 years ago. No complaints. No advertising. Too clean. I searched for their official website. It was minimal. No staff profiles. No case descriptions. Only one sentence. Cognitive restructuring and phased life planning. Phased. The transfer note came back to me. Phase 2. I attempted to contact the firm. No one answered. The automated message was brief. If you have entered your current phase, please wait for further instruction. Entered your current phase. That did not sound like therapy. It sounded procedural. I searched for former clients. There were almost none. But buried in an archived industry forum, I found a 3-year-old anonymous post. The title was simple. Has anyone heard of Phase Path? The post contained one line. They helped me start over. There were no replies. The account was deleted the same day. A delayed sense of unease began to form. If Daniel was following some kind of phased program, he was not running. He was transforming. The blood might not have been staged evidence. It could have been symbolic. A severing of identity. If this was a service, a system that helped people disappear, then Daniel might not be the only client. And Lena may know more than we assume. The scope shifted again. This was no longer a relationship gone wrong. This could be a network, a structured exit from reality. And Daniel may have already entered. Phase 2. I decided to visit the firm in person. The old industrial district smelled of rust. The building had no visible signage. Only a small metal plate near the door. Phase Path Consulting. The door was locked. No doorbell. The glass was tinted. I could not see inside. Just as I turned to leave, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. One sentence. Unscheduled visits will terminate your current phase. I had never left my contact information. I had never entered my name. The timestamp showed the message was sent the exact minute I stood outside the building. I looked across the street. No obvious cameras. But that meant nothing. I did not reply. 30 seconds later, another message appeared. Daniel has completed his selection. Selection. Not accident. Not disappearance. Selection. For the first time, I understood something. This company was not helping people. It was filtering them. Daniel was not merely a client. He was a participant. Perhaps even a volunteer. The blood suddenly felt different. Maybe it was not staged evidence. Maybe it was initiation. I walked away. At the corner of the street, a third message arrived. Cease inquiries into Phase Path. This time, there was an image attached. It was Lena, standing inside an unfamiliar interior space. She looked calm, almost relieved. The timestamp read yesterday. If Lena was a victim, why did she look at peace? If she was involved, had she already entered the next phase? In that moment, I realized something else. I was no longer an observer. I had been noticed. And within this system, being noticed is never a good sign. I could have stopped, cleared my history, pretended none of this happened. But I did not. That image of Lena felt less like a warning and more like a test. When I returned home, I made a mistake. I replied, only one sentence. What is Phase 3? Within 5 seconds, my screen went black. The phone restarted on its own. I assumed it was a glitch, until I opened my browser. Every saved file related to Phase Path was gone. Bookmarks empty. History erased. Even my screenshot folder contained nothing. No deletion log. No trace. As if the research had never existed. This was not basic surveillance. This was access control. They did not just know what I searched. They could decide what I was allowed to keep. Minutes later, an email appeared. No sender name. The subject line contained one word. Eligibility. The body of the email was brief. You have expressed interest. Phase assessment pending. Do not attempt withdrawal. Expressed interest? I asked a single question. But within their system, that was enough. Daniel's search history returned to my mind. Identity reset. Digital erasure. What if that was not independent research? What if it was preparation? Perhaps Daniel received the same message. Perhaps he was not forced. Perhaps he consented. For the first time, I felt something colder than fear. Choice. If this system was not coercion, but permission, then the real question was, why would someone volunteer? Worse still, they now believed I was considering it. At the bottom of the email, There was a faint line of text, almost invisible. Once assessed, reversal is not guaranteed. I shut down my computer. The room felt unnaturally quiet. A realization settled in. I was not investigating a disappearance. I was being invited into one. I did not reply to the email. I did not delete it either. It remained in my inbox, like a decision waiting to be confirmed. At 2:17 a.m. the following night, my phone rang. No caller ID. I could have ignored it, but I answered. 3 seconds of silence. Then a familiar voice. Lena. Her tone was calm. Not frightened. Not rushed. She spoke only one sentence. Do not stop him. I did not respond immediately. She continued. This is not a kidnapping. It was his choice. There was no background noise. No echo. It sounded like a sealed room. I asked where she was. She did not answer. I asked if Daniel was alive. A brief pause. Then, he no longer belongs to his previous life. That was not an answer, but it was enough. Her breathing was steady. No fear. No hesitation. As if she had already accepted an outcome. Perhaps even believed it was correct. I asked, did you choose this too? This time. She did not respond immediately. After several seconds, she said, everyone eventually finds a reason to leave. The call ended abruptly. Not disconnected. Terminated. There was no record in my call history. As if it never occurred. I stared at the empty screen. One question repeating in my mind. If this was truly a choice, what were they escaping from? And more importantly, why? Did Lena sound as though she was trying to protect me? It did not feel like a threat. It felt like caution. But caution for whom? Daniel? The system? Or me? I began to suspect that the core of this story was never disappearance. It was transformation. The real question is, what does rebirth cost? 3 days after the call, a physical envelope appeared at my door. No sender. No postal markings. As if it had simply been placed there. Inside was a single photograph. Daniel. But not the Daniel I knew. He was seated in a white room. The background was sterile. Almost clinical. The lighting unnaturally even. He wore a plain gray shirt. His face carried no emotion. Not fear. Not pain. Something closer to absence. On the back of the photograph, a single line was printed. Identity restructuring complete. Complete. Complete what? I enlarged the image. There was a faint mark on his left wrist. A subtle burn pattern. Not a name. Not a date. A code. P2-17-4. Phase 2. 17th? 4th? I could not be certain. But one thing was clear. If this was a phased system, Daniel was not the first. He was one of many. I attempted to forward the photo to authorities. The email failed. Attachment blocked. The notification was simple. File integrity compromised. I tried encrypted channels. Same result. The image was rejected, as if it did not belong to the public network. That was when I understood. The cost was not death, not kidnapping, not violence. The cost was erasure. From records, from databases, from structure. Daniel might still be alive, but legally, digitally, he no longer existed. Lena had been precise. He no longer belonged to his previous life, because that life had been deleted. The word returned to me. Eligibility. They were not abducting people. They were filtering them, selecting those willing to surrender identity, willing to become a number. A sharper question formed. If Daniel's code was P2-17-4, where were P2-17-1, 02, and 03? Were they in identical white rooms, wearing identical expressions, also declared complete? I stared at the code again. A thought emerged. If they can erase someone, they can also replace someone. 4 days after receiving the photograph, I visited Daniel's former workplace, a modest technology outsourcing firm. He had worked there for 5 years. I expected some disruption, some sign of absence. Instead, the receptionist appeared composed, almost rehearsed. I mentioned Daniel's name. She paused briefly, then smiled. "Do you mean David?" I corrected her. "Daniel Harris." She searched the internal directory and turned the monitor toward me. An employee occupied Daniel's former position. The photo displayed a man, remarkably similar to Daniel. Same hairstyle, nearly identical facial structure. Only the eyes differed. Colder, more vacant. The name read, David Harris. Start date 2 months ago. 2 months. The same week Daniel vanished. I requested to speak with him. Minutes later, he stepped out of a meeting room. His walking pattern matched Daniel's, even his posture. He looked at me. No confusion, no surprise, as if my presence was expected. "You were looking for me." The voice was similar, but something was missing. I referenced a specific university memory. Only Daniel would know. He paused momentarily, as though retrieving information, then answered. Accurate, precise, emotionless, not recalling, accessing. I asked if he remembered Lena. His gaze shifted slightly, then stabilized. I have no associated record. Not I don't remember. Not I don't know her. No associated record. A chill ran down my spine. This was not an imposter. It felt like an updated version. Daniel had been deleted. David had been deployed. Same resume. Same position. Even the same social footprint. But hollow. If Phase Path was not merely facilitating exits, but ensuring no void remained behind, then its scope was far larger than I imagined. Disappearance was not the conclusion. Replacement was. And that white room in the photograph may have been only Phase 2. Phase 3 might be reintegration. Rewritten. After leaving the company, I did not return home immediately. I sat in my car, watching the rearview mirror. Not out of panic, out of verification. I wanted to know if I was being followed. For 10 minutes. Nothing unusual. Normal traffic. Normal pedestrians. Normal city noise. But when I started the engine, a black sedan appeared in the mirror. It did not accelerate. Did not overtake. It maintained distance. I turned. It turned. I slowed. It slowed. There was no cinematic chase. No sudden maneuvers. Only precise synchronization. Like code executing. 20 minutes later, I parked at a shopping center. I stepped out. The black sedan did not enter the lot. It stopped along the roadside. No one exited. No visible movement. Just presence. I entered the mall. Took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Looked through the glass. The car remained. Still waiting. My phone vibrated. Not a message. Not an email. A system notification. One line on the screen. Phase evaluation in progress. I never applied. never consented. Yet the process had begun. A realization settled in. Perhaps I misunderstood something. I believed Daniel chose the system. But maybe the system waits. Once you demonstrate sufficient interest, you are automatically filtered. Not voluntary. Not forced. Algorithmic. The black sedan was not chasing me. It was observing. Confirming proximity. Confirming boundary. Phase path was not hidden in shadows. It was embedded in structure. Corporate systems. Databases. Traffic grids. Identity records. It did not need to abduct anyone. It only needed to wait. Wait for you to approach the edge. The implications sharpened. If Daniel was replaced, if David was a rewritten version, then what happens after evaluation? Deletion? Or substitution? The black sedan disappeared at dusk. No sudden movement. No visible departure. At some point, it simply was not there, as if its function had been fulfilled. When I returned home, a card lay beneath my door. Not an envelope. Not a package. A thick black card. No header. No signature. One sentence. Assessment complete. My hands began to sweat. On the back. Phase 3 authorization granted. Authorization. Not invitation. Not suggestion. Approval. I never applied. Yet I had passed. My phone illuminated. Not a notification. A full interface shift. The lock screen turned white. At the center, a single button. Proceed. Below it, small text. Transition window, 48 hours. 48 hours. The logic became clear. Phase 1, interest. Phase 2, reconstruction. Phase 3, rewrite. Daniel remained in Phase 2. I had advanced further. Or perhaps, I had always been within their calculation. I attempted to power off the phone. The button no longer responded. Only one function remained. Proceed. I placed it on the table. Then the doorbell rang. 3 precise chimes. Measured. Controlled. I did not open the door immediately. Through the peephole, a man stood outside. Black suit. Expressionless. Not police. Not a solicitor. An executor. He did not knock. Did not speak. He simply waited, as if expecting my decision. The phone screen remained illuminated. Transition window, 47 hours, 52 minutes. The countdown had begun. This was not abduction. Not intimidation. It was protocol. Once deemed eligible, the system does not force you. It grants a window. If you refuse, what happens? At the bottom of the card, barely visible text. Non-compliance may result in structural correction. Structural correction. Not legal language. Not corporate phrasing. It sounded like deletion. I stood at the door. The man remained still. No urgency. No emotion. 48 hours. Accept rewrite. Or await correction. For the first time, I understood Lena's warning. Do not stop him. Perhaps not because Daniel was deceived, but because the cost of refusal is higher. The man outside my door did not leave, but he did not advance either. As if time did not apply to him, I returned to the table, staring at the word proceed. 48 hours. This was not coercion. It was permission. For the first time, I began asking a different question. If this is not abduction, why would anyone agree? I revisited Daniel's life. Not police records. Personal traces. Social posts. Archived messages. Photographs, details I had overlooked before, began to surface. In the year before he vanished, Daniel rarely smiled genuinely. His expressions looked practiced. His replies grew shorter. His presence quieter. He was not collapsing, not indebted, not visibly distressed. He was fading, not abruptly disappearing, gradually withdrawing, like someone preparing to leave. That was when it became clear. Faye's path does not capture the desperate. It filters the disconnected, those who are alive, yet feel absent. Daniel was not brainwashed. He found a structured exit. Identity reconstruction, past deletion, rewritten integration. A version of himself, without accumulated errors. No failed records. No relational debts. No documented mistakes. This was not conspiracy. It was a service. Cold, precise, ethically ambiguous. The man in the black suit was not an enforcer. He was a witness, witnessing my decision. The countdown continued. 46 hours, 03 minutes. If I pressed proceed, I would not die. I would be optimized, corrected, replaced, and the world would continue seamlessly. No one would remember my investigation. No one would recall my hesitation. I finally understood Lena's calmness. She was not controlled. She was relieved. The question evolved. Not whether the system is evil, but when existence becomes weight. Do you have the right to delete yourself? The countdown reached 12 hours remaining. The man outside never moved. Like a statue, I realized something. My fear was not of harm. It was of possibility. What if the system truly was better? Cleaner, lighter, free from history, free from accumulated mistakes, free from unfinished regrets. I picked up the phone. The screen remained white. Proceed. No confirmation window. No terms and conditions. No disclaimers. Only choice. I remembered Daniel's vacant expression. Lena's calm voice. It was not brainwashing. It was completion. I pressed the button. No flash. No sound. No loading screen. The display turned black, then returned to a normal lock screen. The countdown vanished. The doorbell did not ring again. I opened the door. No one stood outside. The street was quiet, stable, ordinary. I examined my hands. No markings, no pain, no visible change. Everything normal, too normal. I returned to my desk, opened the computer. The browser loaded. History was clean. Bookmarks orderly. No trace of Faye's path. I frowned. Not because it disappeared, but because I could not remember why I was searching for Daniel. The name felt distant, like something once familiar, but no longer relevant. I opened social media. Everything intact. News updates. Friends. Routine. The world unchanged. The only difference was weight. Something intangible had been removed. A background tension. Precisely extracted. I stood by the window, watching the street below. A quiet certainty settled in. Perhaps this was the correct decision. My phone vibrated. A notification. Phase 3 complete. Below it, faint gray text. Integration successful. There was no fear. No doubt. Only continuation. Across the city. In an office building. An employee reviewed archived records. He opened an old file. Name, Daniel Harris. Status, archived. Operator ID, P3-2201. He confirmed the entry, closed the system. The employee's name was David Harris.